Communication is really the backbone of our connection between spouses. How else do I express to you what's going on inside of me other than communication? There is things like body language and there's action, and those are different types of communication. But today we're going to be focused on the most common form of communication, which is verbal communication. How do I share with you my thoughts, my concerns, my feelings in a way that you can hear? And that's the title of today's class, which is Speak and Be Heard. Because so many times we speak and we're not heard. We may be physically heard, but the point that we're trying to make or the feeling that we're trying to share just doesn't come across. And that's sad because oftentimes when we are speaking, especially to our partner, we have very important things to say, and we have things that are very meaningful to us and come from our heart. And we want that our partners should hear them and understand them and take them with the seriousness that we express them. And yet, oftentimes that fails. Many times, not only do you not end up communicating to your partner, but what ends up happening is that your partner actually hears something different and can get upset, or they can get hurt, or they can get even angry. And then everything just kind of falls apart. And if anybody here has been married like me, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, how is it that, or why is it? Let's focus on the why. Why is it that oftentimes our communication is not successful? Well, there are many, many reasons for that. And some of those reasons are because of your partner. Partner might not be a good listener, but let's not talk about that tonight because that's not what we're here to discuss. But one of the primary reasons is because oftentimes we speak to our partners like we speak to ourselves, right? When I look in the mirror and I say, "Oh wow, you really need to lose weight," right? So that works for me when I'm talking to myself, but that doesn't work when I say that to my partner. Or if I were to say other things like, um, you know, I really should be more conscientious about paying the bills on time so I don't get fees, right? Again, that works when I say that to myself, but if I were to express it that way to my partner, it feels a little domineering, a little controlling, a little insensitive, and it can come up as very rude and actually have the opposite reaction. And you can just come up with a million examples of how you can talk to yourself in a certain way, but then when you share it with your partner the same way, right? What's the big deal? It just doesn't work. Um, One of the reasons why it doesn't work is because when I speak to myself, I've already included all the compassion and love and understanding and sensitivity for myself because I'm me. But when I say those same words to my partner, they don't hear that I think they're really great and I already know that they're so responsible and I do think that they're absolutely beautiful and I am really just concerned about their health and all these other things that are in my mind. But when I just say, hey, you know what, you could stand to lose a few pounds, or wow, those, you're sending out that bill pretty late, or gosh, you didn't show up on time, something like that, it just doesn't work. Okay. That's the first reason. Another reason why oftentimes our communication to our partners fail is because we speak to our partners like we would an acquaintance, a friend, or a business associate, right? This also doesn't work, okay? Because when you're speaking to your friends, you could be casual, you could be serious, you can be joking around, you can be sarcastic, you can be angry, you can be confrontational. All these different ways that we speak to our friends are acceptable when we're speaking to friends or coworkers. I remember once I went to my father's office when I was a kid, and he used to work there with his brother, and so my uncle. And the first time I walked in, I heard them screaming at each other at a volume which I've never heard my dad scream at before. And I was thinking, oh, I didn't even recognize this person, right? If he were to come home and utilize that same method of speaking in our own home, he would have terrorized all of us. So it, like, for instance, if you're out with your girlfriends and you're going to the mall and you say, oh, wow, there's a great place to park. Why don't you just park the car right there, right? All your girlfriends might look at you and say, wow, you're being so helpful. That's terrific. Yeah, I'll just park my car there, right? If you do that to your husband, he doesn't see you as being helpful at all. He experiences that as controlling and distrustful and all these other things. So um, we can't speak to our partner like we speak to our friends or acquaintances. It just doesn't work. There's a lot of unspoken rules of acceptance, love, and respect that need to be employed when you, and I'm not saying you shouldn't speak that way to friends and acquaintances as well, but I think I made enough examples where you get my point. When you speak to your partner, there's many underlying tones that have to be addressed and be sensitive to in order for the same message to come across effectively. My wife once told me that if she's telling me something and she sees the tone, the literal color of my face change, she can immediately tell that I'm angry, upset, or disappointed, and it's very bothersome to her. I mean, just the color of my face, without even no facial gestures, no nothing. So I guess I realize I can't hide anything from her pretty much at all. And that brings me to another thing. Body language is a big part of why communication between partners fails as well. If you're impatient or not paying attention, or you get a scowl on your face, then it's really not gonna go over very well. This brings me to the third reason, which is actually the most important reason why communication between partners breaks down. And this is by far the most important reason. And this is really part of what it means, the definition of what I call relationship-oriented communication, which is what the method that I'm going to be sharing with you tonight is all about. Hello. Good. I can't really hear you, but
Sorry to be late. Just got home from work.
Good. Enjoy. So we're just talking about communication now, and specifically relationship-oriented communication. You're coming in at the best time. So the third reason why communication breaks down, and by far the most important reason why it falls apart, is because the crux of good communication between partners has everything to do with your mindset before you express yourself. Okay, it is known that 95% of the reaction from your partner is going to be based on your approach to the subject matter at hand. Not what you say, not even the tone of what you say, but your mindset and your approach to what you say. And what do I mean by that? When we communicate with our partner, the most important element that we need to take into consideration is, am I owning my own thoughts and my own feelings? This is the foundation of being able to express something in a healthy way to your partner. If when you share with your partner, you've already told yourself that my partner didn't make me feel any particular way, I am responsible for the way I am currently feeling about this. This is merely my interpretation of what happened. I do not have the final say on what actually happened. My feelings are solely my own, and only because they are mine, and that my partner didn't make me feel this way. If you approach your partner in that manner, you're already going to be leaps and bounds ahead in your probability of being successful. If you approach your partner in the other way, which is, you made me feel this way, and it's because of you that this is happening, and really, I'm really angry at you, or you're really a jerk, I'm just not going to say it right out loud, or this is all your fault, or you should be different, or you're wrong and you misunderstood the situation, or you don't understand what's going on. If you utilize that mindset, and never mind if you use that language, I'm just talking about that mindset, your communication is completely doomed right from the start. You're not going to get anywhere with communicating to your partner. Okay, so I'm just going to say that again succinctly. Mindset is the number one factor for successful communication. If you own your feelings and you understand that you are responsible for your own feelings, and we'll get into this, and you understand that your experience of what happened during that event that you want to now talk to about your partner is merely your own experience, and it's not necessarily her experience, or it's not necessarily the truth of the experience. It's just what you saw and how you understood it. So you're owning everything. You will have a much, much easier time talking about what happened to your partner than if you walk into the situation thinking or feeling, or even, or for sure showing, that really your feelings are as a result of your partner's behavior, and your feelings are their fault, and they did something wrong, they did something inappropriate, and that your understanding of the situation is the truthful understanding of the situation. That's going to set you up for major communication disaster. Okay? So I know that that's a very challenging place to be, because most of the time when we approach our partner, we honestly believe that it's their fault and that they did make me feel this way and that they did do something wrong, right? That's usually, like, you get hot under the collar, you're upset about something, you find faults in something they did, and you want to just blurt it out and say, hey, how could you do this? What were you thinking? How could you be so stupid? Right? but that type of communication always ends, unless you're married to a complete paper towel. That type of communication is going to be a disaster. Okay, so let's learn how. Does everybody have any questions so far? Does everybody kind of agree with what I'm saying? Does anybody want to make a comment or understand?
That's going to be incredibly hard. Just even listening to it is painful.
Yes, of course. I can't hear you. Meryl, I can't hear you, sweetie.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
So, yeah, it is very hard, Grace, for sure, for sure. What's interesting, and I talked about this last time in the last class as well, is that if you look at people as like, we're all kind of energetic systems, and we're all walking nervous systems. And so when we're agitated or, even when we're relaxed, people can feel that from us. And so if we're in our head and we're agitated and we're angry and we're judgmental, even if we say it in the sweetest voice, it's going to be heard. It could even be heard incongruent, in an incongruent way to the partner. So the best thing to do is that when you do feel charged and triggered and all that kind of stuff, is to kind of like, I have a somatic process of like roar that I call roar, because it's kind of like, if I'm charged about something, I'm going to do that somatic process before I speak to my husband about something, because I'm going to be in a much different energetic nervous system place when I've kind of like released how I felt and my anger and everything else, so that I'm going to express it differently. And so, because communication happens when people feel emotionally safe. And so it's important to make ourselves feel emotionally safe, meaning being honest with ourselves about how we feel. And if whether that's angry or sad or whatever it is, and then processing it for ourselves. And then when we come to our partner, also making them feel emotionally safe so that they can hear us, because our systems will shut down if we feel attacked. So,
Right.
Yeah.
That's key, 100%. Yeah, to be in a great state of mind, just physiologically, like you're mentioning, is huge. And that roar process, I've used that with some of my clients as well. It's just fantastic to get people out of that triggered state and into a more homeostatic place where they can actually share how they're feeling. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, hon. Okay, so let's talk about let's talk about how do we go from poor communication to great communication, right? How do we get there? How do we express our thoughts and feelings in a way that can be heard? Okay, so the method that I came up with is called relationship-oriented communication, ROC. And the purpose of relationship-oriented communication is to really express your inner reality, right? Your thoughts and your feelings, to share what's going on inside of you personally. That's the purpose of relationship-oriented communication. It's not to, as we talked about, it's not to second guess your partner's motivations. It's not to blame them for anything. It is really just the power of authentically sharing your heart. Okay. And the reason why we want to share our heart in relationship-oriented communication is because when we share almost anything else, it's fodder for fighting. Okay. I just had a story of a couple that I was working with where they were passing by his father-in-law's home, and he wanted to stop in. And well, it's a little bit complicated, but he was passing by a friend's house, and his wife said to him, well, this person's not really a good friend. So, and she had her reasons, and there's nothing wrong with her saying that, you know, she had nothing, she could have even been right. It doesn't make a difference. But the man felt that that this person, his friend, was a good friend, right? And they started arguing about whether he's a good friend or not a good friend, and what the definition of a good friend is versus not a good friend. And next thing you know, an argument ensued and they're fighting, right? So when he came to me and he shared with me what had happened, he said that this has been an ongoing conversation. So I said to him, I said, instead of arguing about the reality of the situation, whether he actually is a good friend or not a good friend, you could just say to your wife, I understand that you don't think he's a good friend, but I feel that he's a good friend to me, right? Once he says, I feel that he's a good friend to me, not whether he is a good friend to him, he shifted the whole dynamic. Now it makes no difference whether or not her criteria for what a good friend has been met or not. The bottom line is that he feels that this person is a good friend, and therefore he's going to treat him like a good friend. And that's the purpose of relationship-oriented communication, which is to share what's in your heart. Because as everybody here knows who've been married, we could argue literally for eternity about who's right and who's wrong and what's truth and what's not truth. Let's just ignore all that and share how we see things from an emotional perspective. Okay? Now, I don't know if anybody had the chance to take a look at the article that I had sent out. Did anybody have a chance to read it? Good, thanks, Grace. And May, did you and your husband have a chance to take a look at that? Did you too? No, okay, that's okay, no problem, no problem. You didn't have a chance to look at it, that's no problem. So, no problem. So we're gonna go over the story in the article real quickly, just so that we can be up to speed in what happened. So the story in the article is a story of, I think her name is Marcia and Doug. Yeah, I believe that's it. I'm just gonna bring it up real quickly. And what happened is that Marcia and Doug are visiting a high school reunion. And they're at the high school reunion, and they go to the bar area, the drinking area, and up comes this guy named Bob who starts talking to Doug. And he says to Doug, oh, Doug, you know, we played baseball together, and you know, we were on the same soccer team, and you were in my history class. And Doug starts feeling a little embarrassed because he literally has no idea who this person is. But he's so embarrassed about it. So he goes and he starts kind of faking it till he makes it, you know, like you're kind of like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that. And thinking that at some point something's going to trigger in his mind and he's going to all of a sudden remember who this person, Bob, is. So they're talking, and finally, Doug says something that reveals, about 10 minutes of the conversation, that he literally has no idea who this person is. And it's very embarrassing for him. And his wife, or his girlfriend, Marcia, starts laughing. And she starts laughing with Bob about how Doug doesn't remember anything, and how, Doug's just, some guy, Doug likes to think he remembers everything, but he doesn't. And, that's just the way Doug is, right? So Doug is like humiliated about this, right? Now, Marcia just thinks it's a funny joke. She's not trying to be nasty or mean, but she just thinks it's funny. So her and Bob are kind of laughing at Doug's kind of faux pas. And so the question is, Doug was humiliated and embarrassed, and he's upset, right? So did everybody get the scene? Explained it? Cool. So the question is, how does Doug express to Marcia that he's so upset, right? How does he get across this thing? Now, obviously, he could just, scream at her right then and there. That's not going to work, right? But let's take a look at some of the things that he could say. Let's just say he is smart enough to wait till he gets into the car. And when they're in the car together on the way home, he turns to Marcia, and he has a lot of different ways that he could start this conversation, right? I mean, obviously the first way, he doesn't have to say anything, right? But let's just assume he's going to communicate. So how would he communicate? So let's go from what's called really bad communication to just okay. All right. So really bad would be, actually, why doesn't somebody volunteer? What would be a really bad thing for him to say? Grace, you could give me a suggestion.
Really bad would be like, how could you do that to me?
Right. That would be really bad. Yeah. And May, what would you say would be really bad? Huh? What would you say would be?
Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I've never used this before.
You're doing great.
I would say maybe being like, what's wrong with you? Why would you do that?
Mm-hmm. Good. Excellent. Great. So I'm going to take it one step even worse, right? So those things are all very good ways to have pretty poor communication, because there's a lot of blame implicit in that statement, and a lot of anger coming out of your mouth, your face, when you say it. But how about if you were to say something really bad, like, Marcia, you are just so rude, right? That would be pretty bad, right? Because it's bad because now he's calling her a name, right? He's implying that he's saying straightforward that you're a rude person, right? I wouldn't blame him for saying that personally, but that wouldn't be an effective way to communicate to your spouse. Now, if he wants to take it not so bad, but still pretty bad, he could say, Marcia, I think you are rude. So he's not saying it's a statement of fact. He's just saying, I think that you're rude. You might not be rude, but I think that you're rude, right? So that's a little bit better, right? Would everybody agree that's a little bit good? He could make it a little bit better, right? Which is, Marcia, I think your behavior was horrible, right? Or you behaved horribly. Right? So now he's not saying that she's rude. Now he's not even saying that he thinks that she's rude. But even if he said, I think you behaved rude, he's removing it from her as a person and saying just your behavior is rude. And then the fourth way that he could say this, which I would say would be on the scale of pretty good, but still just okay, would be, Marcia, I experienced your behavior as rude. Which he's saying, he's not even saying that her behavior was rude. He's saying that the way I experienced that, it felt really rude to me. Okay. I would think the guy's a pretty great guy if he could come up with that one. If that had happened to me, I don't know what I would lose it, but let's just say.
It has happened to you. How many times can we count?
Right. So
we've had practice over the years and training.
So he could say, Marcia, I experienced your behavior. So this is going from really bad to just okay, right? Because what's the just okay part? He's removing the criticism from her directly. And at the end, as you can see, there's 4 different levels of removal, but at the end, ultimately what he's saying is taking responsibility for his own feelings by saying, I'm not saying you're rude. I'm saying that I experienced that situation or that behavior as rude. Good. All right, this is pretty good. We're going from really bad to just okay. But that's not what we're here. That wasn't the big reason why you signed up. We don't want just okay behavior, communication. We want great communication, okay? Okay, so here we go. Everyone got their seatbelts on? This is gonna be really exciting. Okay, don't forget, the crux of good communication is taking complete ownership of 2 things: your emotional experience and your lived experience. Those 2 things, okay? Your emotional experience is, I own how I feel. It is not your fault for how I feel, right? Even though it's crystal clear that it was totally her fault for how he felt. But I'm not talking about that. I'm saying communication. If you want to communicate, okay? I own my feelings, okay? Number 1. Number 2, my lived experience, what I saw, is my own interpretation of what I saw. It is not reality. Marcia could have been laughing at another joke that somebody told her earlier on. It didn't look like that to me, but I can't tell you how many couples I've counseled where one person comes to me and tells me this whole story of something, and then when I hear the side from the other person, it's completely different, almost unrecognizable. So what I experience is my interpretation of what I saw. It is not necessarily God's truth on this earth. You have to have that in your mind. If you have those 2 things, I am responsible for my own feelings, it's not the other person's fault, and what I saw is only my lived experience, it may have been different. Okay? Okay, good. Once we have those 2 things in mind, right, now we can craft some very powerful and acceptable and beautiful statements. It's really easy, right? But we have to have the right mindset to express ourselves wonderfully. Okay, here we go. There's 4 parts to it, and I'll just say what those 4 parts. There's something called a goodwill statement, an expression of lived experience, a expression of my emotional reaction, and then a change request. Okay, and we'll get into all 4, and this won't take long, and it's really easy. It's simple, I should say. It's not easy, it's simple. Let's focus on the middle 2, because those are the most important things we just said before: lived experience and emotional reaction. Okay, because those are the 2 things that we have to take responsibility for. Here we go. Lived experience. A lived experience is what I saw. It is not my judgment of what they did. It is not my implication of what they did. It is not a discussion of the motivations behind what they did. It is just what I saw. Marcia, when you and Bob were laughing at my forgetfulness, right? Can everybody agree that that's actually what actually happened? Yeah. When you and Bob were laughing at my forgetfulness, then we add the emotional reaction. I felt humiliated. Okay, pretty simple. Does that statement assign any blame to Marcia? No. I didn't blame Marcia for that. Does that imply any motivation behind what happened and why she did it? No. I'm just stating what I saw, what I experienced. I experienced Bob and Marcia laughing at my forgetfulness. I felt humiliated. Okay. Now, Marcia could react to that any way she wants. She can be whatever type of person that she is, and she may go into defensiveness. But technically, if she tries to throw defensiveness at me, I can just keep countering with the simple statement: I'm not blaming you. I'm not saying you did it because you're a mean person. You're a great person. I know you meant no harm. I'm just letting you know that when you and Bob were laughing at me, this is how I felt. Okay? Pretty easy so far, right? Now, yes, Grace.
Well, how do we know? Is by saying you were laughing at me, is that an accusation?
There is an implicit relationship that I'm drawing between her laughing and at my forgetfulness. Yes, there is that implicit drawing. But you're going to see in a second how she could challenge that, no problem. Okay, that's a good point, and you're gonna see how this works. Okay. Now we start off. That's just those 2 points are the core. So my lived experience and my emotional reaction, where I'm owning everything. Okay. We're going to dress this up to make it nice. How are we going to dress it up? We're going to start. Number 1 is the goodwill statement. A goodwill statement lets your partner know that you love them, you trust them, you're not accusing them, you would never think that they would do anything to harm you. You know they didn't mean it. So for instance, Marcia, I am confident that you meant no harm. When you and Bob were laughing at my forgetfulness, I felt humiliated. Okay, can you feel the tension just completely escaping the room at this point? Right? Because he's letting her know that he is not accusing her of anything. He's not blaming her of anything. And he's not even looking at her. He's just trying to share that this is what was going on for him when he had this experience with her. Okay? And he's already shared with her a goodwill, right? I know you meant no harm. I love you very much. You're a great wife. I know you wouldn't do anything to hurt me. This isn't about that. You should just know that when I saw you laughing with Bob at the fact that I forgot, that humiliated me. I felt humiliated. Okay. Now, if you're Marcia and you're a sensitive woman and you hear this, you might come up with some things. Oh, I didn't mean to, or it was just a joke, or whatever. Even if you just say it was just a joke, right? He could just say, I'm sure you were joking. I don't doubt that you were joking, but you should just know that that joke humiliated me, right? And that leads Marcia into saying the most obvious thing, which is, wow, I'm really sorry. I certainly didn't mean to humiliate you. I thought I was just being funny, right? Because what else is she going to say? I mean, she could try to say a few other things, but unless she's being really obstinate, he's not even blaming her for anything. He's just saying, and he could even admit that if it was somebody else that heard them laughing, they may think it's funny. It could be that if Steve was next to them and Bob and Marcia were laughing, maybe Steve thinks that's funny. That's fine. But when I'm your partner, your lover, your husband, your mate, when I experience that, this is how it affected me. And I know that you meant no harm. Okay, so good. So now we've got 1, 2, and 3, the goodwill, the lived experience, the emotional reaction. And then the fourth one is a change request, right? Which is really the crux of what we're trying to accomplish here, because ultimately, getting an apology from Marcia is nice, but what Bob really wants, what Doug really wants is that it doesn't happen again. Really, that's really where he's going with this whole thing. So the change request would be, Marcia, I'm confident that you meant no harm. However, I want you to know that when you and Bob were laughing at my forgetfulness, I felt humiliated. I'd appreciate it if you would try to never laugh at me when we were out together. Is this something that you can do? Right? No big deal. Pretty straightforward. She could try, right? And it may happen again, in which case he'd have to bring this up again, right? But he's expressed to her in a very, instead of them, I'm sure that everybody who's on this call can easily imagine that if he were to express this differently, she would react violently against him, get very angry that he would accuse her of such a thing, argue with him about why this really wasn't, why is he being so sensitive? And then who knows what would happen in the future if she did it again. Right? So we want to wrap these requests and these statements very delicately. And the easiest way to do that, again, is to take full responsibility for your feelings, no blame, and understand that your experience was just your experience. And of course, the goodwill statement is huge. And the behavior change request is always something that you have the option of adding. Grace, if your husband were to ask you something like this, right, would you be more open to responding with compassion?
Yes, most definitely. As a matter of fact, I have some relationships with certain people, for example, my sister-in-law, who actually speaks like this. She's an amazing communicator.
Wow.
And so I personally firsthand experience what that's like. And it's just amazing how transforming it is on my end. I end up, if something happened, and it's interesting because I see her do that with other relationships as well. And it just makes me, first of all, it just makes me more apologetic, or just I don't know. She just brings the conversation together,
right,
toward each other. You know, that moving toward.
Yeah.
She does that, right? So I feel like this kind of conversation kind of brings the two people closer together, and the other person wants to, like, they actually hear it. But I do have some few points later on.
Okay.
That I have trouble with.
Okay.
You know,
okay.
For example, like when you when you show your emotion, I feel like I'm almost blaming. I can't differentiate when I experience something between what I experience versus what I feel like I'm maybe blaming. I don't always know the difference. So then when I say that and I get that kind of negative response, only then do I realize I was blaming.
Right.
Perhaps I was never taught how to communicate well. So I don't know the tools. I don't know the building blocks.
Yeah.
So I don't even know that I am doing what I'm doing.
Sure. Yeah, most couples that I speak with, especially with the women, when they come to me and they say, well, I'm just trying to share my feelings, or I'm just trying to say what happened, or I'm just trying to fix the situation, and he gets so upset and he walks out of the room.
And you're like, what happened?
That's usually I know exactly what happened, but the women don't know what happened. That's usually the situation. I almost always know exactly. I say to myself, the first thing that goes off in my head is, oh boy, I'd love to be a fly in that room. Yeah, but this is really a powerful way, of trying to, and I'm glad that you brought up that example of your friend that does this, and how life-changing it was, or communication changing it is for you. And like you said, it brings people towards each other, right? Because technically, and not just theoretically, but practically, we all want to make our spouses happy, right? So if my spouse had a problem with me, then theoretically, I want to appease her issue and to make her happy, right? And so I have to work on myself to, I have my own struggles with hearing, criticism and things that I interpret as controlling and stuff like that, for sure. But, again, if my spouse is, when my spouse is able to say things in a more non-blaming way, what I hear is blaming, and everybody's spouse is different. So I may have to say it this way, and Grace, you may have to say it that way, right? But the goal here is to create a way where we can express what's in our heart, because no one can argue with what's in your heart. No one can say you shouldn't be humiliated. When I'm laughing at you in public, you shouldn't have felt humiliated. That's not even an argument. I can just say, I can even answer to that. You might be right. Maybe I shouldn't feel humiliated, but you know what? I do. Right? So there's literally no argument here. And if she says, well, that's not my fault, you could just say, I never said it was your fault. I'm just letting you know that when X, Y, and Z happens, my reaction is A, B, and C. Right? So that's all I'm saying. When X, Y, and Z happens, it could be anything. When you show up late for dinner, My reaction is feeling rejected and ignored. I'm not blaming you. I know that you work late at work and there's no blaming. I just want you to know that when this happens, this is the way I feel. Pretty simple, right?
Well, okay, so let's say that we do really work hard to be great. We try. And we preface by saying, I don't mean to blame. But what if the other person responds as if they do feel blame? And then the conversation goes downhill already.
Well, let me ask you
So
a
how do
question.
we know if that's
Yeah.
truly blaming?
Well, your partner may think that you're blaming them, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. Your partner can feel that way. The point is that, and I found this to be true, and not only that, but I've also found that that I've studied this as well, that when you communicate something to your partner, no matter what the reaction, they hear you. I know it sounds a little crazy and it's not intuitive, but if I say something to my wife and I say it inappropriately and she gets defensive, one thing I know at the end of the argument is for sure, or the end of the conversation, is that she heard what I said. We may walk our separate ways. We both may need cool down periods. We both may need some time out or whatever it is. But the bottom line is that she actually, because she cares about me, she loves me, and she doesn't want to hurt me or bother me or humiliate me. So you're not going to necessarily get perfection the first time. It doesn't always go according to script. The main thing is for you, Grace, to feel that you're not blaming him, because you're not. You own your feelings. What does it mean to own your feelings? That means that if somebody else was standing at that waterfall, at that water spout, whatever, and this happened to them, maybe they wouldn't have been humiliated. Your partner didn't do something humiliating. It's just that I experienced that. I felt humiliated. And as long as you're clear on that, and that's the way you come across, it's only a matter of maybe not the first time, maybe not the second time, maybe not the third time, but at some point they're going to realize that you're not blaming them, especially when you start off by saying, I know you meant no harm. I'm totally not blaming you for anything. This is my fault, not yours. This is my responsibility. I don't know why I feel humiliated when you laugh at me in public. Now that's absurd because everybody does know, but if you said that, you're completely owning your experience.
But you're also, David, I thought that you don't start out with saying, like, I'm not blaming you. I thought you start off kind of like with a sandwich of like, I know you love me and care about me, and I know you meant no harm, which
100%.
is kind of like a soft landing kind of thing. So you're not even saying, I'm not blaming you.
Right.
You're just saying, I know you love and care about me and see it all the time. And you probably meant no harm. And this is what I saw, and this is what I experienced. This is what I feel. And
Perfect.
then, yeah. And I think what happens is like the partner, like even listening to the story, like I felt shame, like, wow, if I did that, like inside, I feel like a little squirmish, a little like, oh my gosh, like shame. But what also comes out is I don't want to hurt my partner. And so then it makes me want to own up and say, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Exactly. And it could take time. It might not, it may not be the first time you say it. Hold on 1 second. Somebody's trying to get in. I think. It may not be the first time you say it. It may not be the second time you say it, but eventually, eventually you will get across to your partner that you are just trying to express what happened without blame. But again, everybody, myself included, I'm speaking to myself. That's one thing I love about these classes. I get to speak to myself again. It's all about the mindset. If you walk in thinking to yourself that my husband's a jerk, I can't believe he did this, or my wife is so insensitive, or if that's how you're walking it, that's going to come across 100% of the time. And I love what Miriam Ruffles said, my wife, when she talks about the roar process, which is that It helps women and men, but she really works with women, get through some of that emotional angst before they, might want to bring up a subject. Okay. So I just want to say that, Grace, if you want to come up with an example for you, maybe something that happened recently in your life that you want to give this a shot, you're welcome to if you'd like. You don't have to. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we could tear it down real quickly. And you could try to phrase it in a relationship-oriented communication way.
Ooh. I wish I had thought about that earlier. Sorry.
It's okay.
Maybe while Grace thinks about it, I just wanted to add this. Some people might be thinking like, maybe they've been fighting for a long time with their spouse about things and things aren't so good between them. And they might be thinking, well, really, he doesn't care about me or she doesn't care about me and she's done stuff like this before, et cetera, et cetera. When we say the statement of like, I know you care about me and that you didn't mean to hurt me, what's kind of cool about that is it's also lifting the other person up to like a higher expectation, a higher state, and a way that not only can be like that, but you can also see them like that as well, which is kind of cool. So people might be sitting and saying like, oh my gosh, that's not true, really, he doesn't care about me, or really she doesn't care about me, she's done this so many times. But with marriage, it's such an interesting playing field because we want to change the dynamics. And sometimes we can do that by believing the best about someone, even if we're not feeling it. And so it's a great way to start out, because you're kind of putting them in like a higher place maybe than how you have seen them. So you're showing that you kind of believe in them, you believe in the marriage, and then you're saying it in that way. Then you're bringing your heart in and your feelings. And then obviously you guys got married or together because you really do care about each other. So it's kind of awakening that love and that care, for each other, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a really good point, Meryl. That's wonderful. Yeah, it may be startling for some spouses to hear that the partner starts off a sentence with, I'm sure you meant no harm. Yeah, so that's really great. Okay, well, Grace, I don't want to put you on the spot, so.
I do have a scenario.
Okay.
But I'm sorry, was the scenario supposed to be a situation where it was a bad communication because it was really bad?
We can do that. So you could say, just tell me what happened in, a couple minutes, and then we can see how you could express yourself in a way that would work.
Oh, that'd be great. Okay, so my husband and I work together.
Okay.
In my practice. And there was a situation, I guess, crazy day, busy, nonstop, me just task, efficiency, getting done. So I'm in that mindset.
Yes.
And I speak to a doctor, a colleague, who asked me why I didn't do this for her, which I was supposed to.
Okay.
And then I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. So then I went to my husband because I felt he was supposed to be taken care of this.
Okay.
And so no filter. And he could totally pick up on my face, my energy, my muscles, my stance, my breathing. Because I said, I don't understand. How could this happen? Right? And it didn't even occur to me that I said it in such a terrible way, because when he responded, I felt I was blown away by his reaction and that I forgot about mine.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's how it usually is many times.
Uh-huh.
And perhaps, Marian, is it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Miriam.
Miriam, hi, sorry.
Hi.
So I would love to hear your tips on how to get rid of that energy so that I can then set myself up in a better mindset to bring it up. Because I don't know how to do that when I'm in that frenzy.
Of course.
But that's basically what happens many times. And this is one of those very typical moments where I just went, what do you mean you didn't do this like that? And that says so many horrible things, right?
And we've all been there, Grace. We've all been there.
And then I don't even realize how catastrophic that was until I get this response from my husband that it was catastrophic. And then that's how it ends. And then I don't even get to address my issue because the way it was presented was totally like a tsunami.
Great. Okay. So definitely Miriam's going to have an opportunity to share with you. Before we do that though, let's take that situation, just for the benefit of everybody. Let's take that situation and break it down into how we could say it using the relationship oriented communication way. Okay. And see if it'll come across a little bit differently. Okay. So if I got it right, you and your husband worked together. Something was supposed to have been done. He didn't do it. He should have done it, in your opinion. And you freaked out and basically exploded on him to some extent or another. And you didn't feel like you were exploding on him, but that's what you understood happened based on his reaction to you.
Exactly.
Okay, good. All right. So the first question I have for you, is your husband a responsible worker?
Yes.
Okay.
He's right here, actually.
I know. I saw him there.
You did?
Yeah, I can see him in the background every once in a while. He's wearing a sort of orange shirt or something. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you appreciate the work that he does for you?
I do.
Okay. So for you to start off with a goodwill statement is not facetious by any stretch of the imagination.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. All right. The lived experience was that something that you thought he was supposed to have done didn't get done. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
So basically, you could just say something didn't get done, right? Okay. Your emotion. So this is a tricky part, but we can get to it. What was your feeling about that?
Anger.
Well, I think the first feeling for me was I felt irresponsible for my colleague.
Perfect. I love that. That's great. Because anger, I think May said anger. Is that correct, May? Did you say anger?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anger is what happens afterwards. Meaning the real feeling underneath it is that you're afraid of losing this client or disappointing this client. You're embarrassed because you didn't show up properly. And you gave the one that you just said you felt anxious. What was
Irresponsible.
Irresponsible, right? Good. Those are the real feelings. Anger is what happens afterwards when you've already assigned blame and now you're getting upset at him, right? So we'll leave anger out of that just for a second. So the lived experience, something didn't get done, and you felt irresponsible and humiliated and nervous about your client. Good. So how about we just say it as simple as possible? Okay. What's your husband's first name?
Tony.
Tony, you are such a responsible worker. I know you do everything so well around this office. I'd like you to know that when this wasn't done, I felt really irresponsible and nervous in front of my client. Right? I'm wondering if in the future, if you can't get something done that we discussed or that needs to be done at a certain time, if there's any way you could let me know so that I could inform my client and set proper expectations. Right?
Yes. Now, do I say all of that without hearing his end of the story, though?
Yeah, because there is really no.
I see.
What he could easily say is, okay, or I'm sorry, or that makes sense, or I didn't know, or I can't believe I forgot, or you're right, or I didn't know I was supposed to do that. In which case, that's good feedback for you. Oh, you were unaware that you were supposed to do that. So obviously, we have to fix up our communication. Whatever procedures we have in the office, or we could, there's tons of really gold feedback that can come from that once you say it in a way that's non-confrontational. That's when the real communication actually begins. Oh, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I didn't know that would hurt you. Like back to the Marcia and Doug. Oh yeah, I'm very sensitive about being laughed at when I was a kid. This happened to me. I saw my mom do this to my dad. I'm just like super trigger happy when you trigger crazy when that happens. Then you really get to know each other and you can share real things. So in your situation with Tony, he may be thinking to himself, oh, it's just a report, you know, the doctor calls, you don't get it, you got 10 minutes to go, you know, this is what I normally do. But now he's finding out something about you, that you're the type of person that feels really irresponsible when you're unprepared, right? So he'll have that in mind. Like, it took me years to figure out that my wife was a much more practical, a much more, you know, very, very organized and methodical person than me, you know. And we had lots of disconnect in the beginning of our marriage because I'm just like a fly by the seat of your pants kind of guy, you know. And we would argue and fight, and I would never really hear that from her. I would just hear that she's upset at me about something, you know. We never got to the core of who we are as people. And this type of communication opens up that channel where there's no blame. You're just saying to him, when this was supposed to be done, or when I thought this was supposed to be done and it wasn't, I felt this, right? With all that goodwill before and a behavioral change request. And so let me hear you say that.
From the beginning?
Yeah, just, it's 4 statements: behavior, goodwill, lived experience, emotional reaction, and a change request. Not that. You know.
Okay. So I would say, honey, I know you're so responsible and you so care about this practice and you want us to do well. And I truly appreciate all that you do.
Perfect.
Like beyond the beyond. But I just felt so humiliated when I found out that I didn't do this for this colleague. And
that's it. I just, when this wasn't done for the colleague, I felt humiliated. You should just know that I felt humiliated. I felt nervous, right? I felt, what was the other word? Irresponsible.
Right. So do I go on? Oh,
you could if you want to.
That was my reaction, right?
That was your lived experience.
That was my lived experience.
And your reaction.
Okay. So the lived experience is
this wasn't done. Yeah, this wasn't done.
Okay. So then the change.
Yeah, if you want, you can ask a change request. You might not need to. Your husband seems like the kind of guy that he'll get it without you making a request change, right? He understands that, you know, you don't necessarily need to tell him, get your work done on time, right? Yes. But if you feel like you need to say that, the less you say, the better, right?
Okay, so that's interesting that you don't always have to have a change request.
No.
Okay.
Some things are obvious, right? You don't have to. Sometimes the change request could just be digging it in. So I'm asking you that the next time I ask you to do something, you do it right away. I mean, that's not, that kind of undermines the whole energy of what you're trying to say.
Yes.
Right? You should you could just let them know, I'm feeling really anxious or nervous right now because, you know, when I know how responsible you are, but but when my client called and it turned out that this wasn't done, I'm feeling very, very stressed out and very irresponsible, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want you to know that because I know that you care about the way I feel, and I know how wonderful you treat this practice. And I know we're trying to get along as best as possible, you know, in the current situation. I just want to share with you that when those things happen, I freak out. And it's not your fault, but I just want to let you know that that's what happens to me when these things happen.
Mm-hmm. So now I have done that maybe a couple of times that I can remember.
Okay.
So, and I think you're right. In order for me to have that ability to think and process a little bit easier is getting all that trigger out. So then how do I prep myself to that state? How do I get there? How do I get that mindset state as quickly as possible? Because I'm wreaking havoc, right? By feeling that emotion.
Right.
So should I share what I do?
Yes, please. If you wouldn't mind, I would appreciate it.
Yeah. So I developed the ROAR process because as a somatic healer, things are processed in our body. So, and you could do shortened versions of it or whatever, but it's basically the R stands for like writing and ripping. And that's when, and again, it doesn't have to be on paper, but I love to do it on paper. So let's say my husband does something that I'm not going to blame him for or whatever, and I have a reaction. So I might go to a private space. It could be the bathroom, it could be my office, whatever it is. And I have paper, like, cheap spiral notepads that I keep really everywhere. I keep one by my bed. I keep one in my office. I carry one even in my pocketbook, because I can get triggered anywhere, anytime. Just out in the world, someone could cut you off. Someone could,
Yes.
just things happen, and
Yeah.
I know that I get a response.
Yes.
So I would I just take, one of the pages and I start just, scribbling on there, like really what I think and really what I feel.
He's such a jerk. He does.
Yeah, like I totally blame. I totally do everything. But all it's doing, it's just on paper. I'm scribbling. It's almost like being a 2-year-old having a temper tantrum. And then what I do is I rip it up. And then O is for like opening the mouth. So I don't want anything to get stuck in the throat area. So as a somatic healer, our body kind of, we have emotions are energy in motion. So if we have words that are not going to be said or not going to be expressed because you want to keep a relationship or whatever, but you have those words inside your head, inside your heart. So that's why the writing and the ripping is so good. But I also want to give a release to my throat area and to my mouth. So I'll just like, so, and I usually do a silent scream. Nobody hears me in my office or whatever, but I might do a silent scream, like rawr. And then A is for action, where I might feel like just hitting out a little bit or moving my legs. Like I'm activating my fight and flight response, because or in that example that my husband gave about the humiliation thing. So, that's very nice that the husband is going to be like, okay, I'm going to express it this way. But he might have felt like running from the scene. He might have felt like, striking out, and that's just a very normal nervous system response. If we're humiliated, if we're ashamed, if we're angry, we want to hit out, we want to run away. That's the fight and flight response. So I'll do that. Like in my office, I'll like have a temper tantrum with my arms, with my legs. I even have a client when, something happens with one of her kids, she'll go into the bathroom and she'll take like a towel and she'll just wring the towel, and she's just expressing it out of her body. And then R, the R part, there's the R at the beginning, the R at the end, the roar, release. That's when you have the release, because you've just gotten it out of your body. You might hear intuition that tells you how to, how you want to approach your husband about it or partner, or you do it with David's way. But you've kind of like had your big energy experience, you've expressed it, you've totally blamed, but you haven't affected the relationship at all, because now you're going to go to him and you're going to say it in the way that my husband said it so beautifully. Then you can say all the parts. But because then it's like, after you've had that temper tantrum, then your intelligence kind of comes back online and says, he's really great. Usually this stuff doesn't happen. He might have made a mistake. Who knows? And then you're calm enough to say it in the way that David said to say it. But you've had that, like, you've let that energy of heat and, annoyance and whatever, just kind of temper tantrum. You had like a 2-year-old temper tantrum, and it didn't break any relationship. It didn't ruin anything. And it was effective for your body because you let that energy kind of run through your body. So, and I have an e-guide, and I can share the link on the chat if you wanted to, because it explains it even a little bit better. But yeah, that's what I do.
That's awesome.
So it works.
So how do you know when you're ready? Like, how do you know you've released enough?
I think you'll feel it.
Yeah.
You'll feel it. You'll know.
So
and again, yeah.
So sometimes it could take 5 minutes. Sometimes it could take days. No.
I think with the situation that you're talking about, and you said that your husband in general is very responsible, it really could be a minute. Like you could release that in a minute with a quick kind of You go into the bathroom, a quick, and you can air write if you don't have paper. Oh my gosh, I can't believe he did that. I'm so embarrassed. And it's like, it's almost like you're acting, and I'm not even an actress, but it's like you're acting it out and you're giving your body just that expression in private. And then you breathe. And then you're like, oh my gosh, he usually doesn't forget those things. I'm really embarrassed by what happened. And then, a minute later, you can express to your husband that stuff. If it's deeper issues, if you guys have been fighting for a while, if it's the same issue that's come up, you might need to roar a lot.
I see.
So it all depends on what you're dealing with. But with what you said, and you have a husband who has a reputation for, doing things and all that kind of stuff, it could be a minute.
That's interesting because, I've always just thought that my idea of decompressing was only through like my best friends who I confide in, or I vent. We have these vent sessions, but your technique, I can do it anywhere, anyhow, and as frequently as I need it.
Yeah, it's really great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And in privacy, and you're not ruining relationships. You're not lowering yourself to a level where you're expressing yourself in an undignified way. You're not hurting anybody, and it's in private, and it can be done anytime, anywhere. You don't, hopefully you don't have people who trigger you all the time, but if you have, even at that doctor, or that doctor who expressed to you and was angry at you for not showing up in the way that you like to show up, you can roar about that as well. You can have an expression of, wow, that didn't feel good. Rawr. Like the whole thing, even towards that person, which again, you're not going to ruin that relationship. So you just do it in private. And I'll share the e-guide link in the chat too.
For sure. I've really seen it work with my wife too. It's really amazing. Like I've seen that we've had like these interactions where, they've been tense, and, she goes away, and maybe a couple hours later, she's like jolly go lucky again, and I say to myself, wow, that's new. Like that's something that wasn't always
new. Doing this for quite a few years, but
definitely a big improvement from when we first started. And just to be honest, sometimes I'm still, men actually react emotionally very differently. Many men get what's called emotional flooding, and that happens when we're overwhelmed. Women seem to be able to tolerate emotions much more than men on some level, and when our emotions we have a good shield up so that we don't get emotional, but then when something gets under our skin, oftentimes our reaction is much more intense, and we get flooded with feelings. And sometimes the only way that we can move away from that is just time. It's just time and maybe some solitude, or we just do our own thing, or we just need time to process. We can't be in the moment with our emotions as well, for the most part, as women do. It's kind of like a fish out of water a little bit. We're just kind of floundering around a little bit, So
that's like the man cave, I guess, when men retreat to their cave. But again, from just a nervous system perspective, if a man feels attacked, or, again, his fight and flight, might be activated. And so he might have to flee to his cave to process. He's not going to fight with his wife, something like that. So it's like, again, we're all walking nervous systems, and David's technique of communication is wonderful, because it really does calm down the nervous systems. It doesn't shame anyone, and it just kind of brings caring and sharing, which is very beautiful. And then Grace, as you said, like you can use the roar process, because if you're not in that state, even to start it or express it, then you can get there,
Awesome.